Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa, France 24's program focused on the continent. I'm Charlie James, filling in for Georgia Calvin Smith, and here's what's coming up. Sudan's military takes control. The Prime Minister arrested and protesters out in the streets. We tell you how it happened and where the coup stands right now. And we examine Africa's role in keeping the world safe from nuclear weapons. An interview with the chief of the UN body monitoring signs of nuclear testing, Dr. Robert Floyd. Sudan's military seized power early Monday. First, soldiers deployed to the capital as the military declared a state of emergency. Then the transitional government leading the nation to civilian rule was dissolved and civilian leaders arrested. In just weeks, the military was supposed to hand leadership of the Transitional Council over to civilians. Now Sudan's future is once again in limbo. James Vecino with more on how the coup unfolded.
It was fragile. It's now fractured.
First of all, we're declaring a state of emergency. Second, we are dissolving the Sovereign Council and removing the state governors. We remain committed to the international agreements signed during the rule of the interim government, as well as the transition towards a civilian elected government.
Earlier on Monday morning, Sudan's military forces put Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok under house arrest and detained other civilian leaders. Limiting access to internet, cutting bridges to the capital, is the military's latest attempt to take full control of the shared interim government. Protesters, meanwhile, are flooding the streets of Khartoum and Omdurman after the Prime Minister's office called on people to demonstrate against the coup. Security forces reportedly shot at protesters as Sudan plunges into unrest once again.
In reality, what the military is doing now is a big betrayal to the citizens on all levels. We should all take action, and taking to the streets is an obligation.
Sudan's transitional government was shared by military and civilian parties who'd been attempting to return to democratic rule following the mass protests that had led to the fall of former dictator Omar al-Bashir in 2019. But tension among the leaders has spiked in recent weeks, while support from the population has dwindled. The government has been struggling to find answers to economic troubles, including a shortage of food and petrol, and had already faced a coup attempt in September.
For the latest, let's cross to the capital, Khartoum, where our correspondent Asma Ismail is reporting. She joins us now by phone. Asma, where do things stand at this moment? Is the military's takeover said and done, or is this still developing?
Thank you. It's a full-fledged coup at the moment. At noon, as you highlighted in the report, there were arrests of the political leadership, and the government has been dissolved. Although Burhan, the head of the Sovereign Council leading the coup, highlighted that they have froze some of the articles within the constitutional document, but those articles are the spirit and the core of the partnership within the constitutional document, meaning that it's equivalent to dissolving the constitutional document in itself. Although there is no information about the formation of the new caretaker government, but it's very obvious that alliances have been built and that the military RSF are on one side and the civilians and pro-democracy forces are on one side. Popular protests have been organized. As we are speaking, there are a number of protests in a number of neighborhoods in Khartoum and in other states, but all of the streets, Khartoum and other states, are being blocked by barricades, by resistance committees. There are conversations about a big day in October 30th across the country to resist the coup.
Asma, do we know where the Prime Minister is right now?
So we've heard information from the official page of the Ministry of Information that he was being pushed to make a statement, and he rejected. Right after that, the executive director of the Prime Minister's office said that at 5 a.m. men in uniform came and took the prime minister, arrested him and his wife, and took him to an unknown location. That's the information that we have since noon, and then there's no further update on his whereabouts or his situation.
What else can you tell us about the thousands of protesters who are out in the streets today? Because there have been reports of people killed.
Yeah, so I think that the number is larger than anything we have seen in October 21st or June 3rd, after June 30th in 2019. This is maybe hundreds of thousands, not just in Khartoum, Omdurman, but across in a number of areas in Port Sudan, in Sinai, in a number of regions across the country. This is a spontaneous protest, not even scheduled or called for. This was the immediate response of the public to the news of the arrest and the coup when they went out and occupied the streets since dawn today. There have been live ammunition and tear gas and beating of the protesters in a number of neighborhoods in Burri, in Omdurman, on the airport street and near the military HQ. There are confirmed reports of 4 cases death and more than 80 who are injured also, including with live bullets, with bullets and other causes of injuries in the hospitals at the moment.
And Asma, can you give us just a little more context as to how we got to this point? I mean, relations between the military and civilian leadership of the Transitional Council has been deteriorating, but was this expected?
Yes. So since the 21st of September, when the military announced that they have foiled the coup d'etat, there have been a lot of analysis that was a balloon test, and historically in previous coup in Sudan, it was preceded by tests of coups. And again, this is really around a number of issues. One of them is the handover of the chairpersonship of the Sovereignty Council to the civilian, which is due. Also completion of other institutions like the parliament and so forth. It is also hugely dependent on issues related to justice, like investigation in the massacre, in the sit-in, the issues regarding handover of Bashir and co to the ICC. So this has really been a number of issues and differences have been brewing for a while. But the escalation has been building up since the 21st of September. Following the huge marches on the 21st of October, the pro-coup from the military were really pushed and I think surprised by the high number of people who went out to the streets against the coup. So this has really been, and since the 21st of October, this has been further brewing and we have seen an escalation of the preparation of the coup.
Our correspondent Asma Ismail in Khartoum, thank you so much for your work today. Now, on top of the recent political crisis, Sudan has also been struggling economically. Ports have been blocked with widespread food shortages and rampant inflation. The country is in need of international aid to recover, aid that is now being withheld post-coup. Catherine Viette on the country's financial hardships.
These trucks stand idle at Port Sudan. Some 1,200 containers a day pass through the port, which accounts for around 60% of the country's trade. For more than a month, demonstrators unhappy about the state of the government have blocked access, costing the port thousands of dollars a day in lost revenue. The inability to deliver the goods is also contributing to a fresh wave of shortages nationwide. The government says life-saving medicines, as well as crucial commodities such as wheat and fuel, are already running low. The shortages have coincided with IMF-backed efforts to reform the economy that include scrapping fuel subsidies and cracking down on the black market. Measures which have contributed to soaring triple-digit inflation, which peaked in July at just over 422%, before falling below 388% in August and just under 366% in September. Faced with growing unemployment and rising food prices, many ordinary Sudanese citizens say they're struggling to make ends meet.
ما قادرين نقرأ أولادنا ما قادرين نقرأ أولادنا في الجامعة ولا في المدرسة ما قادرين نلبسهم ما قادرين نأكلهم والله إلا من سبحان الله تعالى لا.
Despite the lifting of U.S. sanctions and Washington committing to $377 million in humanitarian aid this year, Sudan is still grappling with the decades-long legacy of economic mismanagement under former President Omar al-Bashir. Financial hardships and rising food prices, most notably on bread, were part of what triggered the mass protests against al-Bashir that led to his ouster in April 2019.
We'll, of course, be following all the developments from Sudan here on France 24, so do stay with us. Switching gears now. Ever since South Africa made the historic decision to destroy its nuclear arsenal 30 years ago, the African continent has been free of nuclear weapons. But work to keep it that way is a constant process involving treaties, governments, and the ultimate goal of a universal ban on nuclear testing. That's the mission of Dr. Robert Floyd, head of the international watchdog that monitors signs of nuclear testing. He is in Kenya currently as part of an African tour, and he joins us live now. Thank you so much for being here on France 24. There are still thousands of nuclear weapons around the world that could be deployed at any time. What kind of role can African countries play globally in limiting or banning these weapons?
Africa is a very important player in the global scene with so many states and representing a large geographic area, but is a solid bloc committed to have a nuclear-free zone in the whole of Africa. You know, this comes from their history of having had tests and even the program in South Africa that you mentioned, but they are so determined in that regard. That gives them a strong diplomatic voice to speak to other nations and other parts of the world about the value of a free zone of nuclear weapons in Africa, which they have, but then also that we should move towards there being a global elimination of nuclear weapons.
And so how do you and your colleagues help advance that agenda?
I'm responsible in leading the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization, which is about preparing for a treaty to enter into force, which is a global ban against nuclear explosions that would be conducted anywhere at any time. And my organization has been involved in setting up over 300 sensor stations all around the world so that we will know with absolute confidence if anybody has used a nuclear explosion at any time and anywhere. This is a way of stopping any nuclear weapon development in a new state or further enhancement of weapons in states that have them, and a critical step if we're ever going to see a world which might be free of nuclear weapons, which I trust we can.
Dr. Floyd, for many African nations, there are daily security issues to worry about, whether that's food insecurity, rebel groups, civil conflicts. So how do you convince governments that nuclear weapons are something they need to be focusing energy on today?
Well, I must say that having visited with a number of the people involved in the CTBTO's stations here in Kenya over the last couple of days, there is no shortage of commitment, enthusiasm, and optimism about this work here in Kenya. We need a cooperation around the whole world for the good of all humanity. And it really is something that does fire up Africans, as well as people from other nations, other continents and parts of the world, you know, to do something for a global good, not just for us, but for the next generation and the generations beyond. African people that I have met are really up for this challenge, that they want to see a world which will be a better place.
Dr. Robert Floyd of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization, thank you so much for your time and joining us here on France 24.
Thank you very much, Chuck.
That's all for this edition of Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us, and do stay with us here on France 24. More news and info up next.